Good morning. It's Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock, and here I am with Norma Talks. And what I'm going to do is last week I spoke about past lives, and I did something I don't usually do. I re-listened to the show and realized I had made a couple of errors. So today I'm doing past lives part 2, but really I am starting with what I call the journey of the soul. And so that's where we will begin. What I discovered through the work that I do over the years was there is a beginning and what I believe is an end, although I have not seen that because I haven't ended yet. Now, I don't mean this life, I mean the journey life. So I want you to imagine this, that you are created as a soul, a little bubble. And how I perceived this was through this large, sort of a milky white, huge. It's not a bubble, it's just there. And out of that huge white bubble type thing come these little drops. But they're not that little, they're, round. And they are souls. No doubt about it. And these souls come down and they come to an area where, in a way, they're sorted, or in the way they're figured by people I call the watchers. People that often I find through different lifetimes when I'm exploring things, there is a watcher watching. But when you first come out, and I did talk about this last week, is that there is some sort of organization things going, and I talked about one person's life that I'd looked at where they were really, really interested, and the man had ended up on Earth, which I'll talk about in a minute, and having to deal with all the emotionality when he had been trained and educated very, very differently. So we've got all these souls, and then they go into different we'll say planets is probably the best way. Some go into spaces, and I'll touch on spaces, hopefully, if I remember, at some point. But they'll go to a different planet. There are a lot more planets out there than we think of. We look at our galaxy and go, oh yeah, this is what we've got. And we're just one galaxy of many, many galaxies with many, many kinds of things, I think. Anyway, the soul will begin. Now, there's some interesting things that happen. And the majority of planets, we'll take Earth out of that, what would we call it? Ability. We'll just take Earth out of it for a moment. There are a lot of planets that are really very mental, very political, some incredibly political. And I have seen that where it reminded me of some of the things we have read about older times. And I quite often, because what is our reference is what we've either read or experienced or know. But there's some planets that are just so political, it's scary, actually. It's like everything is done politically. Rightness, being right, being correct. All sorts of weird. But the one thing that really always fascinated me was the majority of people have had space lives. And I'm going to tell you one little story. I was doing a past life regression workshop in Victoria a number of years ago now, and there was some... probably younger than I am now, but some senior ladies, we'll put it that way. Anyway, there were 3 ladies in the group. So we do the past life regression, to come back, we start to talk about it. And this lady is sitting there with her eyes so big saying, I was an astronaut. I was up in space. I don't even like flying. What? So she talked about what she had seen and discovered. But what I had discovered was that the majority of people have had lifetimes where they've been in space. And how do I know that? It's because in going with people looking back to where they've been in their progression as a soul, is that the majority all end up on spaceships. I've piloted spaceships. I've been to the end where you look out at the black. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers, but Jean-Luc Picard in one of the Star Trek series, name has just eluded me, their spaceship, Enterprise, went right to the end and only ahead was black. And I've seen that. I've seen that when this person was in an exploratory, there were 3 people in this exploratory spaceship, and they went to this edge and there was only black. Nothing else, just black. And they stopped there and they looked at that, and then they went on doing their exploring. There are so many things we do not understand or know from here. So many things that haven't been explored, but I have seen them, and I cannot say I just made them up because I didn't know anything about space travel. Excuse me. I have woken up with a frog in my throat this morning, and it won't clear yet. And hopefully, talking to you and sounding terrible, it will go away. So a very good friend of mine, when I did this journey for her, she was in one of the spaceship life, and it was an exploratory one, and there were several people on that one, and they were just exploring the whole galaxy wherever they were. I don't say what galaxy they were in, but anyway, it's when I began to realize that there were so many. When I took these lots, followed the pattern of the soul back, so many of them had space lives, and no doubt the majority that are watching this have had them. And some people really identify with them and some people don't. And there's many different ways you can do this. Sometimes they're small spaceships and sometimes they're very big spaceships. And I'm going to come back to that. But you have all these different lifetimes in different places and in different types of planets and different awarenesses, different body shapes. One of the other fascinating things I went to was a planet where I was doing this for a friend of mine, where she was like a big bird, like an ostrich type bird, big, but bigger, I think. And there was an animal, sort of like you might say a tiger type animal that hunted them. So there was a lot of fear in that because they had to stay away from these horrible animals that hunted them. But she was a bird, and she often talks about that. Remember that life where I was a bird? Well, it wasn't like a bird. It was more like a big ostrich, and it was big. It was a big, big bird. We would say it's a bird because we identify with a bird, but who knows what it really was. So there are other things that we have where we're not necessarily in human form, where we can take on to these other forms. So the soul, I want to go back that the soul is traveling and may spend a long time in one place, and then it sort of moves on and goes to another place. But there are also, what do you call them? Just spaces. Some of these spaces are where people paint on like the sky that has no borders, it has no frame. They just make beautiful designs of color. I've seen spaces where like fairyland, you think of fairies, like where it's very fairy-like and small beings that are living there, but it's more of a space than a planet. It's a space. Other ones that artistic, music, etc. Now you also have the physicality in some planets like that, but other ones you have these spaces. And I have another name for it, and it just doesn't coming to my head right at the moment. We are full of so many experiences. Most people just don't come right to Earth. Most people come to Earth in various ways. Earth is a very different planet than a lot of planets. And I'm sure there's other ones like us out there somewhere. And I've come to the conclusion, I was going to say always, didn't always come to it. I came to the conclusion through connecting to the Mother Earth. I was a head person more than a feeling person in the beginning of this life. And when I began to connect, and when I began to see, and when I began to just have to take all this information that didn't make any sense to me in the beginning and make sense out of it, was I began to realize that this planet was different from these other planets that I see. I kind of did that reverse, in that when I started going out looking at these other lifetimes people had, they were very different than what we have here on Earth. And then I became very clear that this planet is an emotional planet, and that the Earth Mother, as I call her, has this planet alive. It is a live planet that we live on. Most people don't respect that. I like to believe I do. And because it is emotional, people come here from these very intellectual, mental planets, and they don't know what to do with this thing called these emotional feelings. But let's talk about how we get here. What I began to discover was that people arrived often as souls in a spaceship. So I would see them as people. It could be a little spaceship. It could be a big transport. What I found often is that many of these bring people from another planet where they haven't been getting along, and they're kind of shipped out. What made me think a little bit, being a history buff, was England used to ship people to Australia. And remember, I'm born in New Zealand and my father was born in Australia. So I have that down under connection. And his parents took a steamship with their family. Wouldn't have been very nice coming out, actually. But anyway, but what England did, their jails were too full. It was a very rough time. They packed them all up into boats and took them off to Australia, near Sydney. They let them off, and to begin a life. There were a lot of that. Some went to America. Some went to the U.S. too. They were put there, and I think that where that thought came from was because a lot of people were sent here to Earth from other places for whatever reason, overcrowding, because that happens. All sorts of other things. They sent them off here. And also because, and I had heard somebody said to me once, you do realize this is a penal planet. And I went, what? But when in retrospect now, knowing what I know, I could see that possibly is correct. So anyway, we're here and we have to assimilate and learn. And we do that by having a life and being reborn. So here we are on this planet that has feelings. I always say today that feelings tells us what our body thinks about things. But if you take feelings and you don't do anything with them, you don't acknowledge them, they become emotions and then they break out. So there's a lot of growth that goes on with dealing and coping with feelings, being able to name them, to understand them, because your body and realize that your body in a way. But when I started doing past life regressions, I've been on this earth for a long, long time. Well, all time is one, they say, but I have been very much like a caveman a couple of times. Often, usually because I explore how we die. What happens is because of hurting myself and then not being able to heal because it was early times. I've seen myself as a leader and actually coming across where Rome is. I have had so many lifetimes in Rome, Italy, and feels like to me anyway, in my memory banks, I was there very much when it first began. And I was male, a leader of a small group, and we came to this water. It was a big lake for us. We weren't a very big group. We were maybe 12. And I had a staff, right? Leaders always seem to have staffs or something. And I put it down on the ground and I said, we're going to stay here. And it sounds crazy, but it felt like, and then I zoomed up through time, and I was a senator in Rome on the stairs talking. And I visited Rome twice in this lifetime, and it is so fun. Now I'm just going to make another difference. When I started to go to San Francisco, or through San Francisco, living in Vancouver, heading south, which my husband and with the kids used to go for Christmas time, I would not like it at all. I would be upset. And then one day, because I produced with my business partner at that time, psychic fairs, we decided to do one. Well, we were asked to do one in San Francisco. Cost us a lot of money. But anyway, that's another story. And I had to be down in San Francisco. Remember, every time I hit anywhere near San Francisco, I would not be a happy camper at all. And I had to spend a good, maybe even up to 10 days down there getting everything ready. So I went, okay, I better go in and see what's going on here. So that means I put myself into a past life regression to find out what was going on. What I found was I was a Russian seaman. Remember, there was a big fire, an earthquake and fire in San Francisco. I think it was the early 1900s. I don't think it was the 1800s. I think it was the 1900s. Anyway, I was Russian, big man, big seaman. And I had come off the boat, and I was on the shore when the earthquake and the fire that followed was there, and I died there. So I just want you to point out, because it may happen to you when you go into a place and you don't like it. So what I realized was, and I cleaned that up. And when you're doing it, when you know how to do past life regressions, you let everything go. And after that, I've been fine in San Francisco, and I used to visit San Francisco a lot for business meetings later on, and much later after that. Anyhow, one thing I realized, like, how many lifetimes, where have I been? On this earth, I've been here a lot. So when I have had to experience things, the majority of them I've experienced one way or another. So I could relate. So the soul element. Now, I want to point out in the past life how it affects us, but your soul is still the same one that originally came out of that. What do you call it? The big pod? And I think that's where we're working to go back to. But anyway, that's another story. So in this time here, when you hit emotion, when you go visit a city and you don't like it, you've had experiences there. When you go into places that, like that, the situation in San Francisco for me was really tough, because even driving through it, I after being there the first time, I said I didn't want to stay there at all. I just get through this. And once it was cleared up, once I realized what it was about and the energies transformed, then I could be there, no problem at all. Life is an interesting factor of where you are. Now, I mentioned last time that I had been killed in Berlin area at a concentration camp, and I had been reborn quite quickly in New Zealand because of the people that were there. Older parents, comfortable, seemed like safe life. And it was, in lots of ways, a very safe and a very comfortable life, and very loved and very cherished, which was nice for sure. And it's like we have this world with all these countries and all these elements going on. And for me, there seemed to be a big gap where I went from being basic man or woman, living very simply in the woods, in the forest, and traveling and nomad life, sort of with unsettled land, to where all of a sudden I was more of into like England, Europe, did a lot of Europe lives, a lot of fighting went on there. So it's experiences that you gather and you gain, and you come to understand your emotionality. At least hopefully you understand your emotionality, and you begin to grow. Now, I also had spiritual lives at the same time. every now and again, I would have this wonderful spiritual life, and then somehow I'd be thrust back into, sort of mundane things. So life goes on. Now, this planet, as I said, is very different than the majority of planets out there because they're more mental and they're more. Some of them are very politically run. I don't like those planets personally, and I see that happening here a little bit. That's the only political thing I'm going to say. But I find that we have experience from where we've been on the soul progression, and we tend to bring that forward or from that and come on through. Now, I've been privileged in that I was shown things, I guess you could say, or I would have a thirst of knowledge and experiment with my clients, which didn't seem to mind, which was great. So I got to see a lot of things, and then I began to put a framework together of experiences. Now, I want to talk about death and dying as well. We know we have a lifespan here in this life of what we are, and that life can be very short or it can be very long. And you have experiences in that time period. Now, there is a saying in spirituality about that you have a sort of awakening at death. There's another word for it that's gone out of my head. So it's like when it's time, one thing to always remember: somebody comes for you, somebody you know or don't, a loving being, maybe a family member that's already passed. But we do know by several movies that have been made when people have crossed over and been there and told, you're not done, you got to go back. And there's been several, usually from the Christian element, but still the information, as far as I'm concerned, is very accurate. When you go over there, people that you know greet you. People that you know are there to support you. But also remember, in your spiritual life, that part of you that recognizes there is a power beyond us, out of our heads, but the bigger power that works with us here, you will evolve to where that is. Not what your mind says or what your mind maybe knows, but the essence of your heart. And this is one of the factors of our lives down here, and it brings tears to my eyes, because to live by our hearts, to live and do what we can do while we survive down here. We still have to eat, we still have to go places, and we still have relationships to deal with. But it's like, how have we grown spiritually? How have we grown in the sense of recognizing that every person is a soul, has an element right from that beginning when they first came out, and then started a journey, and then guaranteed it wasn't that you ended up here first, for sure. You came from somewhere else, maybe many places else, and I've seen that. People, that's why I learned about all these other planets through people's lifetimes, what they have done, what they have seen, how they experienced it, and when it's ready to move on. But when it's time to move on from this life that you're in, it's about learning how to let go and surrender what I call the light. Just surrender to love. And it takes sometimes a lifetime to let go of guilt, regret, all those emotions that kind of hold us tight. So when the love comes, we can surrender to it. Death is about surrendering to light and to the next place. And in that next place, you may stay there for quite a while. You may go back to school, learn things you didn't learn. You may just be with people that you love until you decide to come back. If you just choose to come back here, or if you choose to go on. Often I find what we do is we kind of recirculate and we have another experience, a different experience to add to us. And so the awareness of that. But the key is, most of us, I know I was petrified of the thought of dying. I used to be kind of hung up on a little bit when I was little, probably because I could see people but didn't know I could. because we all have guides, a guide, if not one, maybe many, and they come for different reasons. And my guides have helped me tremendously through the life. I was taught for years during my sleep. I would wake up and I'd have this voice, be like a teacher for years and years. And then when I began to think about, and I started, sorry, I'm going too fast. When I started to teach groups, when I started to do meditation classes, I'd be thinking about what I'm going to say. And I know a lot of that came back. And years later, a friend of mine came to me and said, "Oh, you were at such and such a sleep school," because we were sleeping. And she said, "Oh, I just sort of asked my teacher, did they know you?" Right? She had other people as well, but she said, "Do you know Norma?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, she graduated from here a long time ago." That's an in-between school. That's not like a school that we go to learn how to read and write. I was taught for years. Began teaching. I began working with people. Where did all that come from? I'm just a regular, got married young, had kids, was doing the mother thing, but I had this other part of me. As I said, I would wake up with this person talking at me like I was in school. I'd be sitting in a school desk looking up at this person, and they would be, talking away at me. And all that information began over time to come out and began to blend with other information that I would get and have. And that's why I never thought like the majority, because I was taught from a different dimension, in a way, you could say. But we have guardians, we have whatever you want to call them, guides, teachers, whatever, that are not of this realm, for sure. All of us, if we want them, if they're there, if we reach out, ask the question, the answer comes. And then there's us, physical ones that are sitting on Earth, and like me, talking to a computer that goes out. It's pretty fantastic, really. And there it is. So anyway, I'm talking about death and dying. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Not an unfamiliar thing to get sidetracked. Now, if you get a chance to look at some of the movies, Christian-based movies about surviving death, there's a number of them, and some of them are incredibly good. And I often refer to one in particular, whose name I can't remember, but I know the theme of it. And it just touches my heart every time, ever since I've seen it and heard it. And this man, it was a minister, and he still told, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but oh my goodness. Anyway, there's several movies that talk about this, about people dying. They get welcomed, and then they're told, "You have to go back. You haven't finished yet." I just figured that's part of my lot. I guess why I keep going, but I haven't died yet. I thought I might have once, but I didn't. I was really sick. Anyway, people come for you. Don't ever be afraid of leaving your body. Someone will be there. Look for them. One time I thought I was dying because I don't have fevers and stuff, and I had a high fever, and I thought, I'm dying. Oh, then I went, hold on, consciousness. Hold on, no one's here. My daughter, who's on the other side, my mom on the other side, my teachers, my guides, nobody's here. No, I'm not dying. It was just like that. No, I'm not dying. Back in the body, we're good. So it's like knowing that you're always taken care of. There's always people, and if there isn't anyone else, there's one of the tall watchers watching. Just yell. Oh, if you're really, really confused at any time, you don't know where you are, just say, "Oh, I need help here." They will come. They're everywhere. We just don't see them. They are our helpers. They're there. Now, I want to complete the circle here. Nobody has told me this. This is something that I have come to believe. In the beginning, this big white thing, as I see, with the souls coming out, like drops of mother's milk, but bigger, and but not too big, because the watchers that are there, and if they are sorting, they don't sort all of them, but they do sort some, as I talked about in the last past life one. I believe that we continue this journey with all the different planets, all the different expressions, all the different awarenesses. And I believe the soul eventually goes back to join into that. So it's nothing is loose ended. It's we work in a circle. That's why Earth, the planets, they're all circles. Everything has a circle to it. We are born, we live, we die, and then we are reborn, either here or somewhere else. There is no beginning and there is no end, in a sense. There's growth, there's progress, there is an awareness that there is more because we are part of the much bigger picture. And it is understanding that universal love force, which I sometimes can get a little pedantic about, is that connection and that understanding so that you learn forgiveness, you learn acceptance, you learn that you are part of a greater whole, a bigger picture. And so that you can deal with some of the situations that we have to deal with in our life. And we can, as you get to be kind of on my side of the aging process, you just nod your head because you know that everything changes, nothing remains the same. People like to think, oh, this is it. I found it. I found but it's like a continuum. We begin, we have a beginning, we have a middle, and we have an end. Being on earth means we have many cycles. Someone like me cycling forever. And it'll be, and I've talked to my guides about this. Okay, what's next for me? There's going to be some choices to make at some point when I'm not here anymore. But we'll deal with those when we're there because I do have lots of loving support, not only by some beautiful friends, but also by guides who have worked with me for many, many years. I want to thank you for listening to this. It's a little perhaps not as philosophical as I usually am, but maybe some new concepts that you can think about and look at and realize life goes on no matter what. It goes on. And trustingly, you'll learn over time anyway to open your heart and to be aware that life is waiting for you. It is there in the beauty around us. We live in a beautiful world. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of a desert or like I am with lakes and trees. And I lived mostly by the ocean. There's beauty everywhere. Become a part of that. Breathe it in. Be at one with it because it adds so much more to you. Adds so much more. I want to thank you for listening, and I will see you again. I'm going to acknowledge the people who put things on the comments in a minute, but I just want to say as I wrap up this part, thank you for watching. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for the subscriptions. Thank you for the lovely comments I get. Warms my heart, makes it worthwhile for keeping on going, getting up in the morning. Okay, here we go again. Anyway, I want to say thank you, Yvonne, and it's good morning to you, Marie, my heart. Yes, I love you. You take care. Kelly, thank you. And again, always you touch my heart. And he's given me several messages here. I bless you all because you make my life have meaning right now. And I'm going to get teary, so I'm going to say bye as I go.